there are so many debates on training, and I know there's not one answer and there's not one right answer, but I thought we could give some people some actionable information that they could take from this interview or take from this podcast and actually be able to use in the gym themselves. So one of the first things I want to discuss is my style of training versus, and it's not really a versus, it's just, so there's a new school of thought that a lot of the top guys are using. And I'm friends with, Iain Valliere and Ben Chow and, Hunter Labrada and a lot of these guys that are coming up now. And a lot of them use a progressive overload system where they use very few reps to begin with, and then they'll save it all for like a top set where they kind of go to failure.
Right.
Whereas a system that I used more so, and maybe like a Nick Walker uses, maybe a Samson Dauda, Jay Cutler, these guys use more of a system where you're doing 8 to 12 reps for 4 sets, but increasing weight on each set. So the guys who do the one top set will say to the other guys, you're wasting a whole bunch of energy on sets that aren't failure.
Yeah. And
when I think of it theoretically, that kind of makes sense. It's like, if the failure set is what you're really chasing, are all these other sets useless? But then I look at the guys who do the one top set and I think, but I'm doing a lot more volume than you, so my muscle is getting worked harder. So can you maybe decipher this and not say who's right, because I don't think there's a right or a wrong, but like maybe explain both scenarios?
Well, I think that, and that's a good point. I'm personally, just for reference point, I'm closer to you when it comes to building muscle.
Okay.
I personally, and that's going to come back because I think personal preference is sadly a huge part of the answer.
Yeah.
I think that bottom line is, if you train hard, okay, and focus and driven, it will work. Okay. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And if the training you're doing fits your personality profile, fits what you like to do, fits what motivates you to train, what keeps you driven, then you're going to perform better and gain better than if a program, even though it might be superior in theory, it just doesn't fit your preferences, and you're just going to lose motivation. Now, personally, I prefer, for building muscle, I do believe that volume plays a significant impact in muscle growth for several reasons, okay? First, you can create more muscle fatigue, more motor unit fatigue with less, I want to say, potentially negative impact. Because you can actually prepare yourself better for that last set. Now, you might be using less weight.
I'm going to make notes so we can come back to some of these points. Go ahead.
No problem. Sure. You can create more fatigue if you do a few more sets to get to your work set, and maybe those sets are harder in the process, but it's not like they don't contribute anything to hypertrophy development themselves. I mean, and that's, let's just look at and I think that these guys are not actually too far off from each other. Maybe there's a difference between like 2 or 3 reps in those pre-work set. So yes, there's maybe some fatigue difference, but I don't think it matters that much, especially if you are someone who over time increased his volume. Okay. Yeah. Because as you increase volume gradually, you also increase your work capacity. Okay. And that's, I think, is where my experience with athletes matter. Because with athletes, you notice such a thing as, you know what, if you increase gradually the workload, their body becomes capable of sustaining a higher and higher and higher workload over time. They become better conditioned. They recover faster. I mean, things that look great in theory and in science and in studies are not always 100% true in real life. For example, you look at the science of rest intervals, okay? Yeah. The studies show that longer rest periods are better for hypertrophy than shorter rest periods, because you can recover more between those sets. Yeah. But what I've noticed is that if you gradually decrease those rest intervals, the body can become good at recovering faster.
Okay, but sorry, I just want to interrupt. So we have to make sure we are very specific to who we're talking to.
Yeah.
So the people watching the podcast, I mean, some are athletes for sure. Some are marathon runners. I've gotten DMs from a whole slew of people, but for this podcast in particular, let's discuss building muscle.
Absolutely. But what I mean is that physiology is physiology.
Okay.
So if you can increase work capacity, the capacity to tolerate training volume in an athlete, and I'm taking lifting specific volume.
Sure.
Like, well, for example, when I train athletes, we do a lot of heavy squats, heavy bench press, and even some bodybuilding work, and they can handle more and more over time. What I mean is that if you start with more of a moderate volume and you gradually increase the number of sets over time,
sure,
the body can acclimate to that. For example, at the peak of your bodybuilding career, you were probably doing more sets than when you started out.
True.
So because you build more muscle, you build more tolerance. Okay. Now, if you look at specifics, the difference in the training stimulus between the theory of that one set to failure and several and many exercises, it's based on the theory of maximally effective reps. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A maximally effective rep is a repetition where you're recruiting all or as much fast twitch fibers as you can. Okay. And you are creating a stimulus on those fibers. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it's true that to reach a point where you are recruiting as much fibers as possible and putting tension on those fibers to make them grow. Because what makes a muscle grow is not the muscle damage. It's putting mechanical tension on that fiber. Okay. There are receptors on the surface of the muscle fibers, right? And when you're contracting a muscle, those receptors feel the tension. The harder you contract, the more tension you produce, okay? So you need, and the more tension is on each individual fiber, the more that fiber will grow, okay? So that's the first condition. The second condition is you need to recruit a lot of fibers, especially the fast twitch fibers, because they are the only ones that actually can grow significantly. The slow twitch fibers won't grow that much. So for example, if I want a lot of tension, the speed of the repetition needs to be fairly slow. And I'm not telling you to go slow on purpose, because going slow on purpose decreases the force you're producing.
Sure.
See what I mean?
Yes.
If you reduce the force, you do not recruit the strong fibers.
Okay. Sorry. I have to, you're throwing a whole bunch of stuff at me, so I have to interrupt here and there. Okay. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But so how do you walk that line? Because John used to say he liked the concentric portion of the movement to be explosive.
You should always try to lift the concentric explosively.
Okay.
Or at least fast.
So how do you walk that line on what you're saying between being explosive but also being slow?
You need to reach a point, and that's the point. Because if the rep speed is fast, which would be the case with the first few reps.
Yes.
Let's say you're doing 10 reps, the first 5 will be fast because there's no fatigue accumulation. But what trying to go fast does is recruit those fast twitch fibers. See what I mean?
Yes.
If I go slow on purpose, I'm not recruiting the fast twitch fibers from the start. Okay. However, in those first few sets, because I'm moving fast, the tension is low. So these reps are not yet effective at building muscle. See what I mean? When I say you need to get slow, is you need to reach a point in your set where even though you're trying to push as hard as possible, the speed slows down.
I get it.
Because of the each rep, you lose your fatigue by around 3%, 3 to 4%.
So the guys, so Dennis James used to do this thing where it was all time under tension. Now I don't want to single Dennis James out. I just thought of it because it's the first person that came to mind. But when you're doing a slow, extremely slow concentric and extremely slow eccentric, you're still reaching that slow period, but you're saying you're not getting the force that you need.
Well, honestly, and that's where it gets underwhelming. Is that at the end of the day, the result at the end of the set will be pretty much the same if you reach the same level of effort. If you go to failure or 1 rep short of failure, those last 4 or 5 reps will have the same equal effectiveness regardless of what you did in the early part of the set. I just
understand.
prefer faster movement so that you train the nervous system to be better at recruiting the fast twitch fibers. Okay.
I see.
But the point is, if you want a set to be effective, you need to reach a point where even though you're trying to push as hard as you can, the speed slows down. And you know what I'm talking about? There will be a rep. There'll be one rep in your set where you go, holy shit, that just got hard.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and like the video. And if you get a chance, check out the description for all the different links to all the different places you can find Hostile and myself. And lastly, check out hostile.com for our new line of supplements and all of our apparel and gear. Thanks again for watching.